And welcome to Coaching 101 for the NACE convention for 2021. I'm very happy to have you guys. My name is Alex Gunnarsson. I'm the director of esports at Randolph-Macon College. I serve on the competition council for NACE. I'm going into my third year at Randolph-Macon. Been coaching a variety of different games. I definitely specialize in League of Legends and Hearthstone. I used to be a League of Legends player at Miami University back when I went to school. So very happy to come full circle here as a coach. Ryan, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hey, yeah, I'm Ryan Plummer. I'm the coordinator of esports at Montgomery County Community College. We're located just outside Philadelphia. Been in this position for about 2 years now. Really got to build the program from the ground up. I was in a part-time role previous to this role when we were first developing the esports program. So I've been at this program since the start of our program. I've coached in a bunch of games. We're a smaller program, so I've actually been able to coach League of Legends, Overwatch, Smash Brothers Ultimate, as well as Rocket League. I've actually coached all four at once at some point. So that is a little bit about me, and really excited to get to talk to you guys today.
Awesome, yeah. Solid diversity. Daniel?
I'm Dan Novacek. I'm the head coach / director for Kettering University Esports in Flint, Michigan. I've kind of been in charge of the program since we started in early 2020. My coaching background is more in Dota All-Stars from a while ago, way back in the day. But I transitioned from that to like Counter-Strike 1.6 and then Global Offensive and then to Overwatch. And so the only game I really coach fully for our program is Valorant. I was the Overwatch coach until we had one of our GM players come on as a part-time coach for us now. So, but my coaching background is also from traditional sports. I coached soccer for like 5 or 6 years too. So it's nice to have that little bit of extra traditional background that helps with a lot of the esports stuff too.
Absolutely. Yeah. We have a very broad amount of games. And that's the thing. The goal with this Coaching 101 is to look at coaching as a very broad perspective. Throughout the rest of the convention, we will have individual game titles. If you guys do have questions or thoughts of like how to coach individual games, recommend you save them for there. If you need to ask them now, we'll be more than happy to answer them. But I think we're going to try to capture coaching as a whole in an hour. We'll see if we can do it. But yeah, I want to introduce Martyr. Martyr, you want to welcome yourself, introduce yourself?
Hey guys, my name's Martyr. I'm the current esports coordinator at the University of North America, brand new program. Been here for about 2 months working. Prior to that, I was a graduate of Shenandoah University with a Bachelor's of Science in Esports Management. And before my time at Shenandoah, I was a professional coach and player for Overwatch for about 5 years. Before that, I rated world first with a couple of top guilds in World of Warcraft.
Excellent. Yeah. So we got some diversity here. We got brand new programs. We got programs that have been around for a couple of years. We got bigger schools, medium-sized schools, smaller schools. So whatever questions you guys have, I'll ask that ideally you can save them towards the end. I don't want them to get lost in all the memes as we get throughout this hour-long program. But we'll gladly answer all your questions. We do have some stuff prepared we'd like to get into. But yeah, let's go and get into it. The first question is, what is coaching? And that's pretty broad. So I'll try to help guide you a little bit. So maybe think of it like in terms of like traditional sports, or like how is it similar or different? Like what do esports coaches do? I'll start off with you, Daniel.
For me, I guess my approach might be a little bit different. My approach is more helping like the students and the players find the pinnacle of like them. You know, whether it's helping them get better at their game, helping them become better students or better people, getting them out of their comfort zone so they're breaking those bad habits that they might have, whether they realize it or not. It's that like unconscious or that subconscious confidence that they have that everything they're doing is perfect, and finding those little things that they think is right but might be wrong. But more or less just kind of helping them become the best version of them.
Absolutely. Ryan, anything to add?
No, I think that's a really, really great kind of summation of that. And I think that, if you were to really get into like what coaching is specifically, like definitionally almost, you're looking at, developing players in their particular esport to be the best that they can be. I think kind of breaks it down a bit. But as esports coaches and directors, there are a lot of times where we're asked to do more than just focus on the game. For instance, at Monco, we describe it as a holistic program. We're focusing on the whole person. So we're not just focusing on developing them as a student athlete, but we're also focusing on developing their mental health. We're focusing on developing their academics, those pieces as well, their physical fitness. So that's kind of what coaching means to us in this program.
Excellent. Yeah, no, good to hear. Martyr, any thoughts as well?
Pretty much the same as everybody else, looking at developing the student from both their play side, mentality side, student side, citizen side. It's a pretty complete approach, just like Ryan said, holistic. Got to
Yeah.
improve everybody in every aspect.
We'll give you something to add on to, Martyr. And I'm sure, like, talking, Dan, about getting the best out of every student. And then these students are very, very different, diverse backgrounds, diverse everything, skill levels, motivation levels. How do you deal with some of these different students and, like, with these adaptations, Martyr?
So it really comes down to just understanding the student very well and understanding your players very well. Obviously, when you have the ability to recruit a little bit more personally with a smaller program, it helps get that going on the small scale side. So if I'm running a program with 15 players between League, Rocket League, Overwatch, I probably know my players reasonably well, right? And that's where coaches come in when you get a bigger program. But if you can understand how your players think and how they operate, you can understand how to adapt the coaching to them specifically. You get somebody who's, let's say, very introverted, right? They're very introspective as well. So they don't talk a whole lot, but you know from talking to them and working with them that they're always thinking about how to improve what their gameplay is. You don't necessarily need to worry as much about them and their gameplay. Obviously, you still want to work with them, but you don't have to be worried when in practice they're a little bit more quiet, or in VOD review they're not asking a lot of questions because you already know they're thinking about those questions and that they'll get to you with them. Obviously, somebody who's more outspoken, if they're silent in VOD review, it's a little bit of a problem, right? Because the gears are turning, but with that outspoken personality, they haven't spoken. So you just got to keep in mind the specific personality changes and how to work with those.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of quiet people. It's a very introverted field, it seems like, with esports. But Ryan, do you want to touch on like any other like adaptations you want to add? Like maybe focus on like the ego, because I'm sure we've got people in our programs that are very talkative, and maybe the different side of it.
Yeah, I think if you've been in the space long enough, you've all dealt with players like that, players that think this is my team in a bad way, where they want to try and where there's that level of toxicity a little bit, where there is that ego, and it can be tough to reach into some of those players, and that's why I think a big piece of this is, and I'll probably talk a lot about this just because this is something really important to me, but setting expectations up front and early is really important, and holding your players to those expectations as well. If you have a player that you struggle with that aspect, they might think, oh, I'm better than everyone else. I'm going to run the program. I want to run it the way I want to run it. I'm going to run the team the way I want to run it. You have to set those expectations early up. This is what the program is going to look like. And if they do push back against those, there are times where you have to be the bad guy in esports, and that's tough. And I know some people struggle with that. Some people it's really easy. That's something that I've struggled with personally. And so that's really important when dealing with the player that has a big ego.
Absolutely, yeah. You can't always be their friend as their coach. It's very important to draw that line and set those expectations. Dan, do you have anything to add about like how you might treat different players differently with your coaching style?
I mean, every kid's different. Every kid has different emotional intelligence, different, base intelligence and things like that. And it's about working with those different personalities and different learning styles and things like that, and being flexible and understanding how different people learn. Coming from, a partial traditional sports background, a lot of those players are very hands-on. That's all they do is hands-on. And moving into esports, you get kids who will learn how to do things by just listening. And that was a really weird culture shock to me when I made that leap, was seeing I can just explain to this kid how to do this and he knows how. Okay, that's weird, because I'm used to having to show them and have them interact and use it and do things. And it's being flexible in those ways, and doing player-driven things, not so much, this is how I want to do it. This is how my way is the best way. That's it. It's being able to say, okay, I understand that you don't learn this way. Let's do it. Let's learn this multiple ways so everyone understands how it's done.
Absolutely.
If I could jump into, yeah, I think that's really important. It's just being open to a variety of different coaching styles and angles, because like you said, like we deal with players in esports that we might not necessarily deal with in traditional athletics. I also coming from that traditional athletics background, like for instance, we get a lot of students in our program that are on the autism spectrum, and how I deal with those players is gonna be different than how I deal with other players, just because they learn differently with that. And sometimes a big thing, one thing that I had to do is just ask them, hey, how do you learn? Well, what's the best way for me to teach you this? What's the best way for me to communicate to you through that? I think that's really important as well.
Yeah, learning style goes very far for some students as well. It's a little bit like the personality thing, right? You're talking to people in a VOD review, and everybody here's a visual learner, but player 6 on the Overwatch team, right? That 6th player needs to talk about it rather than just watch it. So understanding how the players learn is really good.
And I think I've heard rumors like, Dan, don't you give personality tests to your students?
Yeah, we do the 16 personalities thing. We do personality tests, and we do tilt profiles. So it helps players identify kind of where their tilt comes from, whether it's whether they get mad when they lose a 1v1, or players that they think they're better than, or when they make stupid mistakes, and then taking notes on how their body reacts. Do you tense up? Do you sweat? Do you get really mad? Do you want to slam stuff? Like, how do you react to it, so that you can write all this down? And for most of the kids that I've worked with, writing it down or keeping it in a notepad or whatever, but keeping keeping track of that, when they start to recognize that happening, they're able to dial it back and say, okay, wait, this is happening. I'm going to stop myself now, whether that means taking a break, calling a pause, whatever, to get them out of that and get them back into where they need to be. And then the personality stuff goes into how our kids interact with each other. And it's interesting because each role within the games tend to be specific personality types, which is very intriguing.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I look forward to borrowing that from you this fall. I think that's a really cool, unique idea that I'm looking forward to implement. Before we move on,
me too. I'm borrowing that as well. Yeah.
Before we move on, I want to give Martyr one more opportunity, because I know Martyr competed like high level Overwatch. I'm sure has dealt with egos and like some of these like personalities at a higher level, much more personally than some of us. Like, do you have anything else to add about like these egos in sports?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because there's a balance between a healthy ego and an unhealthy ego, right? So when we're talking about FPS games specifically, and something we'll probably bring up a little bit in the Overwatch panel of mine later too, hit scan ego is a massive deal. The confidence in your mechanical skill, the confidence in your positioning and your ability to win trades is huge. If you guys watch Overwatch League back in the day when Widowmaker was played significantly more often than she is nowadays, the players that win are the players that are aggressive and confident. Two big deals. So being able to balance that and pump up their ego and make them confident, make them aggressive, but not to the point where they're, taking away from the rest of their team, both in resources and mentality and communication. That's really important, and it's something very hard to balance, but it's something that's very, very important to actually be able to find that balance. Obviously, in a game like CSGO or Rainbow Six, Call of Duty, where everybody's hit scan player, it's a lot harder to balance the multiple egos at the same time. But it is very much worth noting that having a healthy ego does help your gameplay.
Yeah. That's probably my favorite takeaway already. I know we're only like 10 minutes in, but the healthy ego, I think, is my favorite vocab word that I want to really reiterate with everyone in the chat. Awesome. Yeah, something else I want to add, like you're talking about with confidence. It's really cool. Like, I mean, if anyone knows about like the Dunning-Kruger effect, a lot of my B teams, they might not be higher ranked than my A teams, but they have unbelievable confidence. Like, they think they can take on the world. And it showed, like, my B team upsets are unreal. Like, my B team won like the ECAC championship last year because they, like, the perception is reality for sure. So having that confidence can go a long way for life students, as long as it's a healthy ego.
Awesome. Can I say one more thing about ego really
Absolutely.
quick? I think that there's, at least with some esports students that I've spoken with, not necessarily the ones on my team, but recruits and things like that. There seems to be a disconnect when it comes to coaching in esports. That, like, again, I hate using the traditional sports metaphors. I'm sorry for this, but when a kid gets recruited to, say, like Alabama, and they go to play for Nick Saban, they don't question him as a coach. they're not questioning his decisions and questioning what he makes or what he does. But what I see in kids that I talk to is, well, what rank's your coach? What rank are you? What rank is your team? What rank is this? That rank is the only thing that dictates whether or not you're a good coach. Coaching has nothing to do with your rank. And if you look at the professional side of this and look at Overwatch League, like Martyr said, most of those coaches in Overwatch League hover around platinum and diamond. Those guys aren't your top 500 players. They approach the game from a different, more analytical standpoint than what your players do. So they're able to find those, macro, micro things that are going wrong that you might not see by just playing the game. And I think encouraging, people finding out that rank isn't everything is a big piece of it too.
Yeah, it's an interesting duality because esports has a ranked ladder, and you can directly compare yourself to everybody else in a straight up environment. But how many times do you think somebody's asked the pitching coach for the Boston Red Sox how hard they throw their fastball, right? Nobody dreams of doing that, but he's respected because he has the skill set to be a coach, not because he can throw 95 miles an hour with the slider to boot. It's that skill set and the ability to impart the information.
Good. Yeah, great point, Dan. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay, so let's move on to practices. And this is something I talk about with my players a lot, is there's a big difference between like playing the game and practicing. Like you can play the game for fun at home, but when we're here in the arena, we're practicing. And what do those practices look like? What is the structure? Ryan, do you have anything to talk about?
Yeah, a typical practice structure for us, we practice, assuming that we don't have any games in a certain week, we'll practice about 10 hours a week, so 2 hours a day. We'll bring them in. Because we're a small program, I'm coaching a lot of different games too, so we kind of have to split it up. We don't have too many games practicing at the same time as other games as well because of that. Just because I want to make sure that if I'm coaching a game and I'm in with the team, I'm active with them, I'm talking to them, interact with them, actually coaching them, as opposed to say, oh, I'm going to hop in with Rocket League for a second. Now I'm going to hop back over to Smash Brothers. Now I'm going to hop over to this game type of thing, and they really only end up getting half an hour of my time. That's kind of how we structure our practices. We do a variety of different things. Important to really focus on not just the tactical. So a lot of times we can kind of get in the weeds of getting into, okay, we're going to play a scrim against this team and analyze that scrim, and that's really good. There's also some technical aspects that go into esports as well. So aim training, things like that. One of the ways that we break it down is just having a specific thing on a specific day. So Monday is our aim training day. We go into that. We do that. Tuesday is our VOD review day. We'll really do a breakdown on the VOD review. That's really important. And then, like I said, setting expectations up front. And I'm going to talk about this a lot today because it's really important for me. It's something that I've learned. Setting expectations up front about what practices are and how you're going to manage those practices is huge. You have to set expectations that you're going to be on practice on time, and that if you're not on practice on time, there's going to be consequences for that. And that doesn't have to be the first time that they're late to practice, they're suspended, or work scheduled me this day, I can't make it that day. If they're telling you that in advance, okay, we can work that out. But if you have a player that's consistently not showing up to practice on time, or we've had players just not show up to practice at all, well, you have to follow through with that. You cannot allow them to continue to get away with that. And if you break kind of that expectation barrier, you're going to have a lot more players that think, this isn't as serious as I thought it is.
No, absolutely, yeah. Showing up is step one. I completely agree, Ryan. So, Marta, I know you haven't necessarily started yet in the fall. Maybe you could talk about some of your plans. You could talk about, as a graduate of Shenandoah, like an amazing esports university, like some of your practices and what they look like there.
Yeah, so I adopted an interesting practice scheme from my time working with the Koreans in Overwatch. And typically what we try to do is 50 minutes, give or take, on, 10 minutes off. And they would actually call it rest period when they would ask for it during Overwatch scrim. And when you have a 2-hour time block, you don't want to run, an hour, 45 minutes into the wall, 15 minutes before the next scrim block, especially if you're running back to back, double books, right? So having that 50 minutes where you're playing actively, give or take, and in that 10 minutes we can stand up, stretch, go to the bathroom, get water, talk about some feedback items. It's really important to refocus and come back into that second half of the scrim block with your second wind as opposed to falling flat, as I imagine everybody here has seen happen, where the latter half of the scrim block is interesting to say the least. But something like that is what we're going to adopt on a daily basis. And it depends on the skill level of the team as far as a weekly plan. I know Ryan mentioned 10 hours a week, and I think that's good for a club team. It's a pretty consistent schedule. Some teams might want more. So usually when I get teams that want more is we double block 3 days a week. We have 1 week or 1 day of the week that's a scrim and then a VOD review, and then our last day is just VOD review only, and then exercises and stuff like that. So around 20 hours a week total, double it up a little bit, but making sure that you weave VOD review in and out is really important.
Well, that's a great point. I'm sure a lot of people have questions about this. Do you mind going a little bit more in depth, Martyr, about like what a VOD review looks like, how to VOD review?
Yeah, sure. So it's a little bit different when it comes, game to game. Obviously, a game like Smash, you kind of just watch the game back, but in a game like Overwatch, where you can pull out the top-down perspective as well as the POVs, you really got to review it ahead of time, at least twice probably, and come back and say, these are the most notable points and things that we can look at and say definitively, this is what happened, this is what could be done better, this is what we want to see next time. So if you're spending, let's say we look at Shenandoah versus Randolph Macon Overwatch set, which, a best of 5. Let's say we went 3-2 all the way down the wire. That's over 2 hours of VOD time that you're looking at, right? But if you can break that down and come out and say, these are the 3 key fights on this map, let's say King's Row, that changed the game. Let's look at what happened, how we can do better, what to do next time, and break it into parts that match up with the rest of the set of maps you're looking at and the skill sets you need to work on. It's going to be a lot more effective. And I think as well, just isolating key points and then trying to line up those key points is a really effective game plan for breaking down VOD review and not overwhelming your players.
Yeah, no, thank you for going in depth on that, because I know VOD review is a big thing, and a lot of coaches don't necessarily know. Like, a lot of these players don't know what they're looking for, like what's going on. So adding that structure, I think, is really important. Dan, so talk to me about some of your practices and what they look like.
I'm going to kind of echo both of them. Ours are very structured. I mean, we practice 2 days a week because right now our lab space is a little limited because we're in between areas. So we do 2 days a week. We scrim one day, and we do 3-hour blocks. So we'll scrim usually like an 8 to 10, and then Thursdays we'll spend just doing VOD review. I don't want to say just VOD review. It's mostly VOD review, but we also will work on like some technical stuff like Marta was talking about, whether it comes to like aim training or whether it comes to, just positioning and composition talk and things like that for the team. But I think keeping a structure is good. I mean, especially for all these kids, in class and things like that, they kind of, they like to keep that structure so they know what's going on each week, and it's not just, they're not blindsided by something completely new. I mean, with all of our rosters, we try to keep it that way. And I mean, sometimes we switch up with certain ones because they like it that way. They like doing different things every week, but for the most part, it's, let's keep the structure. Let's keep it that way. But the one thing we do too with our VOD reviews is we like to keep them player driven. We don't want to sit there and talk over the VOD, whether it's myself or our player coach. We don't want to sit there and go, this is what you're doing wrong. Why did you do this? We want them to say, okay, this is what I think I did wrong. This is what I'm seeing. This is what I think happened. What are your thoughts type thing. So we like to make sure the teams are involved. So it's not just, I'm going to sit here and fall asleep while we're doing VOD review. They're actually like giving us feedback and input on everything else that's going on.
No, that's great. And I know that's like one of your big takeaways today, Dan, is just like treating everyone differently, and like these different teams like want different things. So that's super important. Like if I could take my big takeaway for the day is I have steel mentality, and like just to build on what Martyr said with like that rest period, like the 10 minutes. It's so important to just have that mentality. If you're like stressed, you got a big test tomorrow, like whatever, you're burnt out, you're not going to play well. Like these esports are very like performance based. So it's super important to have the right mentality for sure. But building on what you talked about, like I really liked creating like a positive growth environment. Like I know there's a lot of like toxicity and like feedback, and these VOD reviews can sometimes get tough, like managing that as a coach. So how do you create like a positive growth environment? I'll start off with you, Martyr.
Yeah, so creating that positive growth environment is very important when we talk about, especially like we mentioned earlier, the holistic development of a player. Is one of the things that has to be outlined first and foremost, among other things, is we're here to improve and we're here to grow. That's the bottom line. So obviously it's a little bit difficult, especially, when a player's making mistakes and getting called out, as has to happen sometimes, especially in one-on-one reviews. But, nothing's personal. We want the best. So one of the biggest things that you got to keep track of as a coach is if you're coming to a player or your team and saying, we keep making these mistakes, we've made this mistake, we failed this, so on and so forth, it sets a tone of negativity and it kind of breaks their dedication towards improving because they're seeing all of their flaws, all their mistakes out in front of them. So if you come back and say, okay, this is what we did, what can we do better? How do we improve? How do we grow from this? You take a mistake and don't really point it out and say, this was a mistake. You say, okay, this is what we did. It happened. Now what? And that now what's the really important part in growing, because, it's the next step. And presenting that as something that's a bonus item is way more important than saying, okay, we fixed a mistake and now we're back to level.
Absolutely, yeah. That positivity goes a long way. But I know, everyone's different. Like some people don't necessarily respond to positivity. Some people enjoy that coach that will chew them out and push them to be the best they can be. Dan, I know your big point. Just everyone's different. Do you have any players that respond better to kind of getting chewed out?
Yeah, I do, and I'm not a fan of it because I'm not an overly aggressive person, so when it comes to that style of coaching, it's just not my thing. They enjoy the negative feedback. So I know when I talk to that person and when we're doing a VOD review or whatever, I'm giving that person just the things they messed up on. That's it. There's no, I might compliment one or two things that they did, but it's mostly just negative stuff. I mean, the rest of my team, I kind of do the compliment sandwich thing, where you do the positive and then a negative and then you end in the positive. That works really well, because then they're more open to taking that negative criticism when you're saying, okay, you did this really well, but you can work on this at the same time, but you also did this really well too. So I've found that helps a lot too, because they like to know that they still did things right while learning that, okay, you're not a perfect player. Nobody really is. So here's what you can fix.
Yeah, I really respect that, Dan, because I think what I really want, it's something I've had issues too, is finding your coaching style. And once you do it, kind of stick to it. If you try to be all these different coaches, go from their friends, their enemy, they'll notice that you're fake. They'll call you out on it. So just finding your coaching style. And just really sticking to it. But Ryan, do you have any other thoughts when it comes to a positive growth environment?
That's really good. You can still have a set coaching style while still adapting to players. So that's really important. Those things are not mutually exclusive. So I agree. Yeah, and something echoing a lot of what the other guys said. I think those are all really good points. Something I've also noticed though with a lot of our really aggressive players that just want me to yell at them and that type of stuff. For them, the positive reinforcement is winning a lot of times. So when we win, that we'll celebrate and we'll get hype about that, and we'll really, that's when I'll really reinforce them positively. It just depends on the style. But yeah, no, I agree with a lot of what the guys said. And one way that we foster a positive mental attitude is we use the term positive mental attitude a lot. And I make sure that, there's all kinds of studies that show negative reinforcement with players. For instance, and this is something I struggle with in an Overwatch game, or something like that. Oh, I'm dumb. Oh, I'm bad. Oh, I'm an idiot. That type of stuff. That will affect players. And so we try to set our program up, so that if, even if they're just joking around or they're not serious, I might call them out on that and say, hey, positive mental attitude. Keep it positive. Let's not get into that. Keep that positive reinforcement up, and they will do better for that.
Excellent. No, thank you. No, I think we've got some really good points too, and I see we have a lot of questions coming in, so I promise you we'll get to those in a second. I just want to ask one more question to our panelists before we move on to some of your questions. I want to ask you guys just what do you wish you knew when you started as a coach? What are some of the early mistakes you made that you wish you knew, because I know a lot of people here in this channel are new to coaching and they're looking to coaching 101, trying to figure out the basics. So Dan, I'll start with you. What do you wish you knew when you first started coaching?
I kind of said it at the beginning that, when I came in, I was used to I thought the only way to coach was to be hands-on. That's the only way to do it, because that's what I was used to. When you're running a soccer practice, you're running drills. That's it. You're not just sitting there going, okay, this is how, this is how you put curve on the ball. This is how you take a free kick. This is how you do. You don't explain it to the kids. You put it in front of them and say, okay, let's work on this. But now doing it, since I've been coaching esports now for 5-6 years, it's looking at all those learning styles and knowing that, okay, this is a different environment and everyone learns differently here. It's not all just hands-on. It's, being able to be flexible, like I've said 100 times throughout this so far. Like it's just making sure you understand that everybody in your on your teams and on your rosters are different, and you have to be willing to to flex yourself around how they learn.
Oh, good. Yeah. And much like our practices, it's nice to have like a theme that you're following throughout and repetitive. So, and I think that's what we're kind of doing here. We're doing like a coaching session where we're just like constantly reiterating the theme. Ryan, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that I wish I would have known when I first started getting coaching is, I'm a little younger, so I'm closer to the age of the students sometimes, and I tried really hard when I was first being a coach to really be their friend. And we talked about this a little earlier, but we're their coach, we're not their friends, and so sometimes I let players kind of take advantage of me a little bit, and that ended up burning me in the end. And so that's something really important for me, and that's something that I've kind of restructured the program a little bit so that they know I'm your coach. I'm not your friend. Once you graduate, we can be friends, but when you're involved in the program, I'm your coach, and we have to take this seriously.
For sure. Yeah, I had a similar issue. Yeah, I'm a younger coach as well. So Marty, you might need to reset your camera, but what do you wish you knew? Well, I guess you are kind of like a brand new coach, but maybe learning from like Joey or Zach at Shenandoah, like what do you want to know?
Yeah, I do think my camera froze, but I'm still here. Um, but yeah, I think the most important thing that I wish I knew starting as a coach is what kind of resources are available for you guys out there to use. So obviously, when I started coaching originally, I just essentially went, I don't like the coaches I have right now as a player. I'm going to do it myself, right? But then you get into it and realize how much it actually takes and what actually goes into it. And like a couple of guys here have mentioned, I myself have had to deal with it as well. The average age for a high level esports player is very young, but the same thing as coaches. All of us obviously having playing experience prior to coaching now. And you know, understanding resources for VOD reviews, for aim training, for just generic coaching techniques, how to set up practice regimens, training regimens, uh, you know, getting aim training for the games that are necessary, APM training for the games that are necessary, actually learning the game itself. There's a lot that goes into it, and just having, the resources there to be able to build that support structure behind you, but even more importantly, knowing who are the resources and building the support system around you. So, like you mentioned, my connection with Joey at Shenandoah, he gave me a lot of information in running an esports program, being a director. And I would encourage everybody to reach out to everybody that's been here on this entire NACE panel, not just, to people I've mentioned or people on this panel, but everybody who's spoken, everybody who's been here and attended, and just talk about, hey, what are you guys doing? Maybe it doesn't work for you. Maybe it does. And, it's another complicated part as a coach, but it's got to take what works for you and what works for your team and go with that. Got to be flexible, got to be able to adapt. Not every game plan is going to work for your team. Maybe the meta doesn't work for your team. But if you find what works for your team and give them the best environment, then you've succeeded as a coach.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. What I would make my point building on yours kind of is I really learned about like challenge and support as like fundamental for the education process, where we need to challenge them, push them to grow as people, but we also need to get a balance of support as well. And it seems like, I don't know, maybe it's just an early with esports, but college is very challenging. College is very difficult for a lot of these students, and it ends up a lot of our esports programs end up being leaning more supportive just to balance out the challenges of college. So these esports programs need a lot of support and resources for sure,
Especially
to
with
balance
the
out the challenge.
quarantine and everything going on too. That shift to online, we saw a massive increase in kind of the stress levels, and academic performance took a bit of a hit too with that. So they are relying on these programs to help them with that structure.
Absolutely. So let's get into some questions. So let's see. So Steve Shoemaker, I appreciate you reiterating our point with like the football coaches and respect. It's all about respect of the players for sure. Let's see. So how many players do you have on a team that you can make suspensions for being late? This is asked like Ryan while you were talking about like being very firm with your players if they're late, if they're not missing. Like, how do you deal with that?
So this is the question of the day type of thing. Yeah, it's very very difficult situation, especially with programs that don't have a lot of players. Like for instance, like our League of Legends team when I first started, we had exactly 5, and so if I had to kind of deal with that, that was it would have caused causes issues. I've been lucky enough to not have to suspend a player that would cause us to have to forfeit a game. But I would say, we have forfeited scrims before. We have forfeited scrims before because I said, okay, this player's not playing in this scrim because they didn't show up to practice this week. And I think, it's really important to recognize, who you are as a team. For us, it's a varsity sport. If my varsity, if a basketball player didn't show up to practice, didn't tell the coach anything, just decided not to show up, they would be treated, they would be suspended. They would be, they would be given maybe a warning the first time. A second time they would do that, and you have to hold to your guns. I know that's really really hard because there will be situations where it's a major issue where you will have to maybe forfeit a game or play with a backup player that might not be as strong. But if you don't set that expectation, then the students aren't going to react. They're not going to, if they don't want to be a part of the team, you kind of have to set that up. And so I think that's, it's really important to just stick to your guns and make sure you set those expectations up. And a lot of times too, the first time that happens, they get it because their team is now, hey, we just had to forfeit a scrim or get rid of a scrim because you decided not to show up to practice this day. And the team can kind of gather around them and not to create a mentality of like, oh, this person's ruining everything. But, they kind of recognize the responsibility of what being on the team is. And we've seen really positive reactions. So I completely understand. We're not a huge program either. But you got to stick to your program.
Absolutely. Yeah, set those expectations. I love it, Ryan. Anything else to add from the other panelists about like punishments? Yeah, Ryan did a great job covering.
I mean, our punishments are really more just straight. I kind of like what Ryan was saying. If you don't show up to practice without notice or or a valid reason, I guess it's starts off as a warning and then it's a scrim suspension, and if it continues, it's removal from the team. I mean, I've luckily only had that happen twice, so I've only had to remove 2 kids from the team who are chronic absentees who just decided they didn't want to say anything. They attended a few practices and a few games, played for a season, got their jerseys, and then I never heard from them again. So it's about being stern and making sure, kind of stepping away from, I'm not your friend, I'm your coach, and you're not helping your team members. It's a team game. It's not a solo thing anymore.
Yeah, and that's like you said, I've dealt with that issue as well too. But I've also dealt with the issue where like I kind of let them get away with stuff like that, and trust me, it only gets worse. If you let them do that type of stuff, all of a sudden they're not, they didn't show up to scrim now, and now we can't play a scrim because they didn't show up. I've had players, I had one player that we had to remove from the team that just didn't show up to a match. One day, just decided not to show up, didn't tell anyone anything about it, and part of that's on me. I can admit my mistake on that. I didn't set that expectation early. I didn't stick to my guns on that, and it got worse. So the one bright side kind of that is if you get on it early enough, it won't cause any more issues in the future.
Yeah, and I can confirm that as well because the last team that I coached at Collegiate before accepting this position was at Shenandoah for Valorant. We had an individual who believed he was the best player in the team, and he was very mechanically gifted. But he had a hard time showing up on time to practice. We got on him about that. He had a poor mentality. We got on him about that. And he got away with it for a little while because we only had about 5 players on the team, so it was a bit difficult to replace him. But eventually, we found a 6th and said, all right, look, dude, day of reckoning has come. Things need to get better. And we laid down a law, and he said, no, I'm not playing by those rules. I'm doing my own thing. And we ended up having to remove him from the team. And that was the best thing that we did because we went on a 7-game win streak immediately after that.
That's great, Martyr.
Team environment got so much better after he was gone. It's a lot more focused on growth, improvement, and getting that result as a team rather than individual play. It really did change a lot of things.
Excellent. Good success story. So a lot of questions, but not too much time. So we'll try to speed run this a little bit. We got another question from Kovacs. Great guy. I got to meet him not too long ago. Do you have any software platforms for VODreview, Martyr? I know you were talking about VODreview earlier. Anything in particular comes to mind?
Yeah, that's one of the things that I mentioned in the chat as well. And another person mentioned insights.gg. It's another good tool as well. But we're fortunate in Overwatch that we have the in-game replay system. I'm hoping everybody else picks up along with that. It'd be really useful. But otherwise, recording spectator POVs is one of the easiest ways to do it via YouTube, or you can do it via Twitch as well. Tools like Epic Pen, just to be able to draw on those VODs, is really important. Obviously, screen share via Discord is usually how you would do that. Although, if you're fortunate enough to have your own team space and do it on a big projector board or a TV, that helps as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for those of you that are looking to start a program, like we have a little couch TV area, and that's super beneficial to any arena to have that VOD area. Good stuff. So, Dan, I'll ask you this. So, how to deal with or mitigate passive aggression between players on the team? Like, what are some ways in which to reset the team's focus, like mid-game fights? How do you deal with that passive aggression?
For us, it's been a lot of calling pauses. We have one team in particular, I won't mention which one, but they get at each other's throats really bad. They're all in the same fraternity together. And so they're around each other all the time. And they have a habit of letting one bullet in a game decide how it's going to go. And if it doesn't hit the way they want it to, that's it. They're mentally boomed. They're tilted. The game's done. And I mean, these guys are all very talented players. I mean, they've finished nationally in every tournament they've played in, but they just can't get over that. And it's calling pauses and bringing them back down to earth and saying, this is, you guys are supposed to be friends. You guys are supposed to get along. You guys do all this stuff outside. Why are you letting this dictate it? And that goes back to like the tilt profiles. And since we've been doing that and giving them the opportunity to research it, or not necessarily research it, but look into how they react to situations, it's been able to bring them down better when things like that come up. And it's working with the students to develop those emergency, like, what do you do when this starts happening type thing. And there's not really one broad answer you can give to that, because again, it varies by player to player, but allowing them to work together on those profiles and stuff helps a lot.
Yeah, for those of you looking to hire a coach, conflict resolution, dealing with these personalities, that's a big part of it, arguably more so than the games. But as far as the games, Eric Street had a question about do you have to be a college esports player to be a college esports coach? My input on that would be for Bloom's taxonomy, you need to be able to apply some of the knowledge. You need to show that you know what you're doing. But that might be more for in specific game coaches. If you're looking for a director, that may not be as particular. But I think for specific game coaches, you need some sort of. You don't need to be pro level, but there is a level with every game where you understand the game. Does anyone have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'd never played collegiate esports, and our teams have done decently well, I'd like to think, in the coaching sphere. So, you don't have to. But obviously, it helps a little bit to have that game knowledge and have that program knowledge, but you can learn that stuff without having actually been a player yourself.
I'm going to age myself here, but esports wasn't a thing in college when I went to college.
Also true for me. Yeah.
I'm probably one of the older ones, one of the older coaches. I'm 34. I graduated from high school in 2005, and so esports was not a thing in college for me. It was a jump to tier 3. I mean, I had a Dota All-Stars team that was shoddily put together by myself and one of my friends, that we just traveled the Midwest and went to LANs all over the place. We competed at LANs. Hey, I will say I got to play against Fear Dota, world champion. I did play against him when he was in All-Stars. Loved it. Best time of my life. But I will say you don't have to play in college to be a coach. It's about being, having that mindset and knowing the game and being able to translate that into a way that players would understand.
Excellent. Skylar Hendel had a question, asking if we're part-time, full-time, or volunteer. So I'm a full-time director, not necessarily a coach. I do fill in as coaches. Pre-pandemic, we did have coaches come in for each individual game for 2 hours to run a VOD review. Ryan, are you part-time, full-time?
I'm full-time, but I'm also the director. So I'd highly recommend you have a full-time director. We also have an assistant coach that focuses on our Smash Brothers and Hearthstone teams that is part-time. There's a variety depending on your level, I think.
Dan?
I do 2 full-time jobs. I'm one of our school's DBAs. I work in our IT department, and then I also run the program full-time. I'm head coach, director, however you want to phrase that. I basically run all the administrative stuff, and I coach Valorant. We have student coaches who work with our Overwatch team. We have another staff member from the school who works in IT as well, who coaches League of Legends. And then we have some alums who coach our Rocket League and Rainbow Six teams that are paid.
Martyr?
I'm full-time, and that's pretty much all I got to say about that for right now anyways. I'm essentially the director, so we're recruiting for all of our games right now, and eventually we'll probably be full-time coaching most of them, if not all of them. So
Yeah, I think that's the standard across a lot of schools right now, but hopefully we grow and we build more staffing.
yeah.
George White asked, are you aware of any like offline training that is valuable, like speed and strength training, similar to traditional sports? I can answer this one. So at Randolph-Macon, we do have a workout requirement. What we really like to focus on is cardiovascular health and that heart health, because you can imagine with some of these high intensity games, your heart's racing like crazy. So the more you can like exercise and like we do like a lot of like, get your heart rate up, bring it back down. And it's really important, especially those games, you got like a big game 4, you come back, win, forcing a game 5, your heart's still racing in game 5. Like you have not come down yet. So it's really important to reset and build that cardiovascular health. Really quickly, does anyone have anything else to add with like?
Yeah, just to add on quickly. Yeah, there's all types of studies that show physical training affects in-game performance in esports. So I'd highly recommend getting on a physical training routine, working with your nutrition department, something like that, to maintain that growth.
Yeah, and to add another fun side effect as well to that, one of the main concerns about esports is a sedentary lifestyle. So it really helps in your recruiting side. Obviously, it's a recruiting 101, but it really helps parents to understand that you have their health and nutrition in mind as well, and that they're going to go outside and see sunlight. So adding that in is a big bonus.
It's all cardio for us too. That's what we focus on. I can echo that. It's walk, go for a walk, run, like do something, and we make sure that they're going to our facilities on campus at least twice a week to do something.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure you do a good job with it, Dan, with your traditional sports background. Ryan, I'll let you answer Christian Greer's question about do your athletes compete in a variety of games or just focus on one or two? Because I know you have a smaller school. Did you have to stretch it out?
So we leave the option open to them as to whether or not they want to play multiple games. The one stipulation on that is because we're a varsity sport, if you play multiple games, you have to be at each game practice. So there's no skipping Smash Brothers practice today to play Overwatch. And we also limit them to no more than 2 games at once. Because again, 6 hours a day of practice, you're just not going to be able to focus on your studies. We also, if they play multiple games, we make sure that they maintain high academic standard. Make sure that their grades aren't slipping once they start doing that. That's really important for us. But, we're open to, we don't cut on our team. So I'm open to having people, we've had people switch games who've never played a certain game or add a game on. I'm open to it. Yeah, like John said, it's very rare for players to play at a high level at multiple games. Not impossible, but very rare. So you're not going to see them being like captain of one team and probably captain of the other team being amazing at these games. But if they want to participate, they can participate in our program.
Absolutely. Martyr, looks like you have a question from Jacob Deba. This is for Martyr. I am the coach of a newly formed Valorant team. How do you think I can set up my routines and also be a better coach in a new game?
Yeah, so this is actually a really interesting one and can get specific too, which helps. So one of the biggest things, especially in a very structured game like Valorant, and it translates over to CS, is setting that aim training aside from normal scrims and practice times is really important. Just being able to train that mechanical skill is really, really useful. But one of the things that needs to be set up ahead of time and will help you be successful is knowing what your game plan is when you go into a map. So let's say buy-in, for example, set a default take for your first pistol round, your second pistol round, what happens if you bonus, and then your economy from there, right? So you need to have defaults set for A, for B, for all different situations for both sides, right? So obviously if you have a full buy, you can't take A the same as if you're taking a pistol round. Obviously the same goes around on the defensive side of things, but if you can come up with a distinct set of game plans for your players, hand that off to them, and then go into practice and scrims and say, we're going to focus today on full buy attacking A and how to execute that strategy, and then go through systematically to where a couple weeks or maybe a month in, you're competing against teams and your players know immediately like, okay, we have a full buy, we're attacking Haven C, this is what we do, go. That's going to help you a lot more than trying to coach micro gameplay from the background. But as far as routines, I would say probably pick what you're going to be doing each day in each scrim once you get those game plans set down.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's a big part of coaching as well. Is like it's our job to focus on some of the more macro concepts and the ideas and stuff, and maybe some of that more micro stuff they can work on their own time and stuff. And a lot of the micro comes down to just grinding it out, the execution. So our jobs as coaches is to give them those ideas. Excellent. So go to pregame hype songs. I definitely would go to like some League of Legends songs. Like they may not do the best job like balancing their game, but they do a great job of like creating these like awesome music videos that definitely get me hype before games. Do you guys have any good ones?
League of Legends is pretty spot on. There's a couple really good ones by Fat Rat as well.
I don't really listen to music that often, and I don't listen to music to get me hype. I know I'm weird, but like that's just how I am, so I don't really have a pregame hype song.
I listen to a lot of music, but I don't think any of it's going to be pregame hype song style stuff. So, I listen to a lot of heavier music, and all of it's good hype songs. I mean, it all goes pretty tough. So, yeah.
Awesome. We got another great question from Cody Dragon at Kovacs. Is like any idea the optimal time for aim training that we can keep in mind here at Kovacs? And I don't know, like my first thought is just like an outside looking in would be like the more the merrier for aim training. But Martyr, and I know you're focused a lot on FPS. Like, do you think that there's like an optimal time, like maybe to keep someone's attention on? Is it like more the merrier, or at some point does it like too boring?
No, you mentioned attention span, and I actually was thinking about this too because it ties into VOD review. So I would recommend doing the same thing that I would recommend doing for VOD reviews is 15 minutes on, 5 minutes off. 15 minutes of focus, going hard, and getting that information across, and then 5 minutes to sit back, relax, digest it. Okay, let's do it again. This really resets that attention span, and obviously, gamers have a little bit of a tendency to be ADHD, so helping everybody stay focused is really important. And obviously, an hour straight's not going to happen.
Awesome. Yeah, so true. So for these last couple minutes, I'll just give you guys one more opportunity. Dan, is there anything we didn't touch on that you were like really passionate about that you really want to tell like new coaches?
I mean,
put you on the spot.
The one thing I will say when it like with, I want to kind of echo what Martyr was saying earlier. If as a coach you feel like maybe something's either not registering right with your students, or something's going, some players aren't understanding how you're trying to get things across, or things like that, don't be afraid to reach out to other coaches. Just because you need help doesn't mean you're a bad coach. That's what everyone's here for. We're a big support center for each other. If someone's keeping things from each other and trying to, this is my industry secret, I can't do this, this is going to ruin my program if I get it out there, like that's not, I guess that's not cool to me. I mean, in traditional sports, that happens all the time. There's all kinds of crosstalk with coaches. I mean, yeah, they're not going to give away their playbooks and stuff, but if they're struggling, yeah, they're going to talk to each other and say, hey, how do your players respond to a drill like this or a drill like that? Like, don't be afraid to ask other coaches for help. Obviously don't ask them, like Martyr said, you're not going to want to ask them for, their list of how they're going to attack Bind tonight. Like, obviously no one's going to give you that. But if don't be afraid to reach out to anybody. The esports community is very welcoming, and everyone wants to help each other succeed, and that's what it's about.
Absolutely, yeah, because it's all new for all of us. I remember when I first started out, like YouTubing, like how to coach esports. There's not many resources out there yet, so we're relying on each other for sure. Ryan, is there anything that I didn't touch on today that you really want to talk about?
Yeah, one of the sort of, I don't know if it's unique, but kind of perspectives that I've come into is like when COVID happened, I was coaching a bunch of games that I had no clue how to coach at all. And so I would just say, if you're in that situation, you can do it, first off, and you can have successful teams. Don't get overwhelmed with that. But I would say lean on your players. They're the experts. Your goal and a coach in that situation is just set the expectations, set the program up, set the structure up, and then allow them to thrive in that. Lean on your players, pick a good captain, pick a captain that's going to help your other players out and lead them and help them to get better. And then the rest is you're just managing. You're managing the program, making sure that they're adhering to the rules and making sure that they're not breaking those. And yeah, I would 100% agree with Dan. And you see this again, like you said, in traditional sports all the times. I mean, even at the top highest levels, like I know Dabo Sweeney has reached out to coaches and been like, hey, like, what are you doing and that type of thing. I'm a big Clemson fan. Head coach of Clemson football team. Yeah, so reach out to us. I just put my email in there. We all put our emails in there. I would be more than happy to answer any questions. The eSport, people are some of the nicest people you will ever meet. They're all willing to help out, and I would love nothing more than to help you guys out with any questions that you have.
No, that's a great, like, student leaders. Oh my gosh. Like, I'm so glad you mentioned that, Ryan. Student leaders are huge. Like, you find some in your program, like, they will make your job a lot easier. So great point. Martyr, anything else you would like to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, student leaders are a very crucial piece of that puzzle as well, because one of the things, among others, that you really can't control is when you're not there as a coach. They're going to meet up outside of team practices and, play ranked or, just hang out and talk or do study sessions and stuff like that. So making sure that you have somebody on that team that you can trust to create a good environment. Obviously they'll be upset at you at times, right? And so it's not so much about whether or not they're mad at you or saying bad things, but it's just so important to have that captain that when things are out of your sight, you would know that your vision's upheld, the integrity is upheld, the growth environment is still upheld, and that no matter what happens, your players are in good hands and you're having a good experience.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to everyone in chat asking some great questions. I'm so passionate about coaching. I'm so glad we got to talk about it a little bit. Stick around because if you want to learn more about the specifics, I believe the next session is like individual game titles. So if you want to learn
I'll be at Rocket League.
Excellent.
Plenty
of content still there. So
I didn't get invited to that one.
I'll do Hearthstone tomorrow. But thank you guys so much and have a great day.
Great. Yeah, thank you guys so much.